Hey everyone, welcome back to the next part of the PCU series. Before we dive in, make sure you head over to my Spotify and hit follow. We're aiming to hit 1,000 listeners, and I really appreciate all your support. Also, if you want to become a member and get early access to all my videos, check out my Patreon and join the community. All right, enough talking. Let's get started, shall we? I felt the textured grip of the pistol in my waistband as we pulled into the empty driveway. The interior of the house was dark. The only illumination was the orange glow coming from several streetlights. The house itself was unassuming, as was every home the PCU housed its employees in. With its 2 floors, white siding, brown accents, and perfectly manicured lawn, nothing seemed out of place. Glancing down the street, I could see the white transit van filled with fully kitted HQ security waiting for my command. A few hours earlier, I had been standing in the analyst's office watching a video of the man who left the file on Project Skinwalker at my door. Ben, our head analyst, found footage from a parking garage housing the fleet of civilian vehicles for PCU operators. The license plates were removed and the tracking beacon disabled. The driver knew his way around the facility. After dropping the envelope at my door, he dodged most of our surveillance. But Ben's team was able to find a traffic camera that caught footage of the car being dumped at a scrapyard several miles north of headquarters. A team was sent and recovered the car before it could be destroyed. The sedan was swept, and our driver was identified, David Lewis. He was a lead researcher for the PCU within the Archivist Division. After joining the PCU when he discovered the remains of an ancient sphinx during an archaeological dig in Egypt in '92, he had a steady career studying and recording cryptid encounters for our organization. I turned to Michael in the driver's seat. "Ready?" He nodded, and we stepped out. The rest of Reaper Squad was positioned a block away. I took a deep breath as we approached David's house. Michael and I were dressed in casual attire with our concealed sidearms. We just wanted to speak to David and figure out what he knew, but if he put up a fight, we would need to drag him in by force. We stepped onto the wooden porch and froze. The front door was cracked open. Glancing at Michael, we drew our pistols. I tapped my earpiece connected to our comms. "Overwatch, this is Reaper 1. Front door is ajar. Reaper Squad, move up and prepare for entry." Michael and I stacked beside the door. A moment later, the rest of my team appeared. Alex joined us on the porch, while Logan, Eli, and Ryan moved to the back. "Reaper 1, this is Reaper 4. Ready for entry," Logan called over the radio. I squeezed Alex's tricep and he pushed the door open. We flowed into the entryway and began scanning. Since Michael and I were in civvies and didn't have our night vision, we had to use the flashlights mounted on our pistols. The house was quiet. I heard the click as the back door opened and the rest of my team entered. Most of the homes provided by the PCU were built the same way, so the layout of David's house was the same as mine. We cleared the kitchen, living room, and garage. David's personal vehicle was missing. Moving back inside, we ascended the stairs to the 2nd floor. Entering the master bedroom, we found clothes and papers scattered across the floor and bed. Once the rest of the house was cleared, I tapped my earpiece. "Overwatch, this is Reaper 1. No sign of David." I glanced out the window facing the front and saw the van pull up as the security team hopped out and entered the home. "Reaper 1, copy." I holstered my pistol. "What do you think?" I asked, picking up some of the papers. Michael stepped out of the bathroom. "Well, his essentials are gone and the safe under the bed is empty. He clearly didn't plan for a short vacation." A few hours later, I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. The security team started a more detailed search of David's property after we left. I hoped they would find something. Stacy's arm was draped across my chest. The sound of her rhythmic breathing and steady heartbeat was soothing. I reached over and brushed a strand of hair off her face. She adjusted and pulled herself closer to me. I grinned, feeling her warmth beneath the blankets. I glanced to my right at the necklace, sitting on my nightstand. Slowly picking it up, I felt the cold metal of the disc attached to the black leather cord. In the dim light, I could just make out the unfamiliar markings etched into its face. After I returned from our mission in Louisiana, I tried doing research on voodoo necklaces. From what I could find, my best guess was that this was a talisman. For what purpose, I didn't know. None of the ones I found matched the one I had. I knew I needed to ask Tom about it. If anyone knew who or what Madame Marie was, it would be him. I placed the necklace back on the nightstand and settled under the covers. Pulling Stacy closer, I drifted into a dreamless sleep. The next day, my team and I were sitting in a different meeting room with Ben at the table's head. Another mission had come up. Both Tom and Reynolds were too busy to give us the briefing. Ben cleared his throat and dimmed the lights. The projector came to life and showed a map of Manhattan. "Last night," Ben began, adjusting his collar. He clearly didn't like giving briefings. Several 911 calls were intercepted from civilians saying they were seeing little gray aliens roaming the streets. The map zoomed in on a small section of the city as red dots appeared. These are where the calls were made. Ben clicked to another slide, showing a man roughly in his mid to late 30s, dressed in an overly expensive suit. "This is Alan Johnson. He was the brother of Wyoming Senator Matthew Johnson. According to his brother and social media, he was visiting Manhattan with his girlfriend." The next slide showed a mangled body cordoned off with police tape. At roughly 2 a.m, Mr. Alan Johnson's body was discovered mutilated just outside Central Park. The map returned and a blue dot appeared along with the red ones. Michael raised his hand. "Did any street cameras catch the attack?" Ben shook his head. "No. The NYPD and the FBI have looked into it, but they say the cameras in the area were likely damaged during a severe storm yesterday and didn't catch the attack." Ryan raised his hand. "What about the girlfriend?" "Miss Jones was still in their hotel room. She told the investigators that Alan left a few hours earlier to get dinner." I raised my hand. "So do we know what we're dealing with?" Ben sighed and clicked the remote. Several yellow dots appeared along the streets near the red ones. "These here," he continued, "are manholes going to the sewer system." The next slide was a picture of one of the metal discs. There were several deep scratch marks around it. Our contact with the FBI on scene sent us a sample code from these marks, and we identified it as Gnomes. I leaned back and groaned. Not only would we be operating in the sewer, we'd be dealing with one of the more annoying cryptids. Unlike the bearded, pointy-hatted lawn guardians we know and somewhat love, gnomes are mean, carnivorous little things. Their heights ranged from 2.5 to 3 feet. They have pale grey skin, due to their subterranean environment. Facial features vary, but the most common traits are pointy ears, large eyes, jagged teeth, and an underbite. It is unclear exactly how and when they came to the US, but most believe that in roughly the 1800s, several gnomes hitched a ride on supply ships from either Wales or Germany and began spreading across the country. Normally, gnomes only ever go after small animals, but every once in a while, a group will get brave enough to kill a human. They were a pest. I heard Alex groan. "What about Phantom Squad? Isn't that their turf?" He had a point. The PCU had multiple teams stationed across the country. Under ideal circumstances, the team closest to the mission location would be the one sent. But that is dependent on the availability and skill set of the team, hence why Reaper Squad has gone from Florida all the way to Alaska. Phantom Squad is currently on mission in Michigan right now, Ben explained. He glanced at the door and lowered his voice. "To tell you the truth, cryptid activity has been very high lately. We're a bit spread thin at the moment." I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hands. I thought back to what Madame Marie said about the end of a chapter in our war against the darkness. Could this ramp up in activity have something to do with it? "Any questions?" Ben asked, turning the projector off. None of us said anything. He took his glasses off and wiped the lenses. "All right, your flight leaves in 30 minutes. We headed to the locker room and quickly put on our gear. Since we would be going into the sewer, everyone wore extra waterproof clothing and an air filtration backpack for our gas masks. We then headed to the armory. Due to the close quarters of our mission, we had to switch primary weapons. Alex, Michael, Eli, and I swapped our HK-416s and Benelli shotgun for suppressed Daniel Defense Mark 18s. Logan, still wanting something hard-hitting, opted for the Q boombox in 8.6 blackout. Ryan kept his fairly shortened M249. Alex wasn't happy about leaving his M302 grenade launcher behind, but after reminding him that we didn't want to collapse the city, and the fact that, even if he did need to use it, the engagement range was too close for the 40 mic to arm, he relented. Each of us did take our M67 hand grenades, but I hoped we didn't need to use them. I was not a fan of using explosives underground. Having used grenades while clearing cave systems in Afghanistan, the concussion within solid walls is not a good feeling. After making sure everything was loaded and secured, we made our way to the waiting SUV and headed to the airport. "You know," Eli said, breaking the silence, "maybe we'll get lucky and the alligators people flush down will eat the gnomes before we get there." "Or," Michael added, "a group of reptiles doing karate will deal with them." Everyone chuckled. "If that's the case," Logan said, "I call dibs on Leonardo's katanas." We all turned and stared at the large, lumberjack-looking man. "What?" he asked innocently. "I watch cartoons sometimes." We laughed again as we approached our waiting flight, but as we pulled up, I noticed that instead of the Goliath, our normal transport, the Hercules was waiting for us. We exchanged a look. This wasn't the first time we had taken different means of travel, but it was the first time with a different C-130. We climbed out of our SUV and loaded into the plane as the ramp closed. Once we took our seats, I felt the jolt as we began taxiing down the runway. I heard the crackle of the intercom as the Hercules pilot, Rick, spoke with his thick southern drawl. "Good afternoon, ladies. This is your devilishly handsome and far more skilled captain speaking. Our flight from hot-as-hell Texas to the one and only Big Apple will take about 3 hours. If y'all get hungry during your flight, there will not be a stewardess to provide snacks. And if you get bored, too bad. We thank you for choosing Air Hercules for your travels." When he finished, I felt the wheels leave the tarmac as we began our ascent. A few minutes later, Rick exited the cockpit. With his faded cowboy hat, perfectly waxed mustache, and aviators shining, he nodded at us. "Howdy, boys. How y'all doing?" "Doing all right," I replied. "How about yourself?" Rick leaned against the nylon-webbed seating. "Just dandy. What are you doing up in the city that never sleeps?" "Sewer gnomes," Michael said. Rick grimaced. "Well, I don't envy you. I prefer to be up here." He gestured to a porthole. "I get claustrophobic." We chuckled. "So what's Nick up to?" I asked. Rick stretched his back. "He had to take Berserker Squad up to Washington. We've been pretty busy lately." "I've heard," I said, leaning back. Whatever was going on had even the pilot scrambled. "Do you have a gremlin as a co-pilot too?" Eli asked. Rick's mustache curled up with his grin. "Course I do." He leaned over and pushed the door to the cockpit open. "Say hi to the Reapers, Jimmy," he yelled. We heard a gravelly screech from inside, and with a tip of his hat, Rick returned to his seat, leaving us to enjoy the rest of the flight. 3 hours later, I awoke to the jolt of the Hercules landing on the tarmac. I stood, popped my joints, and grabbed my gear. The rest of my team did the same. The ramp lowered, letting the cool air flood in and send a shiver down my spine. We stepped out onto the wet airstrip and looked around. The sky was heavily overcast. Despite being mid-afternoon, it felt more like evening. To our right, instead of just a vehicle waiting for us, a black Chevy Tahoe was parked. Leaning against the driver's door was a woman wearing an FBI windbreaker. She pushed herself off the vehicle and extended a hand as we approached. The agent was about 5'2" with dark red hair, vibrant hazel eyes, and a light complexion. "You must be Reaper Squad," she said as I took the offered hand. "That's correct," I replied with a nod. "I'm Agent Janet. Welcome to New York." She gestured to her Tahoe and climbed in. Turning to my team, I noticed Alex's eyes following Janet. I lightly kicked him in the shin. "Pick your jaw up and focus. You can ask for her number after the mission." Alex blushed as the rest of the team gave him a knowing look. We climbed into the SUV, and Janet pulled away from the Hercules. "Have there been any new developments?" I asked as we left the private landing strip near LaGuardia Airport. Janet shrugged. "Not too much. We've got agents and SWAT keeping an eye on every entrance to the sewer. So far, nothing's peeked out." A silver BMW cut us off and blared its horn. Janet swerved and let out a string of words that made even my Marine ass blush. "Local PD is on scene right now," she continued. "He is doing his best to keep civilians at bay." "What about the body?" Ryan asked from the far back seat. "Mr. Johnson's body was taken to the morgue. One of your analysts examined it but didn't find anything new, just that he was cut up by gnomes." "Just cut up? Nothing was missing?" Ryan asked. Janet shrugged and pulled out her phone. "I've got the report and photos here," she said, tapping the screen. I felt the buzz from my phone. Unclipping it from my plate carrier, I opened the file. Not fully knowing what to look for, I sent it to Ryan. "Have there been any more 911 calls since the body was discovered?" I asked. We sped past a station wagon whose elderly driver gave us the finger. "None relevant to this case." "Why Johnson?" Michael asked. I glanced back, seeing him looking at his phone. "What do you mean?" Janet asked. "Well," he continued, "according to the dispatch records, multiple people reported seeing little grey men roaming the streets, and I assume not everyone is inside during that time. So why have we only found one body?" I saw Janet think for a moment, then pull out her phone and start texting. I gripped my oh shit handle tighter as we moved between traffic. After another 20 minutes of tense driving, we arrived at the target location. Several people in hazmat suits were milling about, taking readings and moving equipment. We peeled ourselves out of the Tahoe and approached one of the police officers, not in a hazmat suit. He turned to us, and an expression of relief passed across his face. This officer looked young, maybe mid-20s, tall and very thin. His name tag read, Dale. I noticed that his uniform was wrinkled, as though he had slept in it and immediately come here. "You must be the Reapers," he said, holding his hand out. I took it. He had a surprisingly strong grip for someone of his physique. Another thing I noticed were his eyes. They were a cold and bright shade of green, one I had never seen before. I felt as though they were not just looking at me, but through me, and into the deepest parts of my soul. It sent a shiver down my spine as I looked into them. Shaking off the feeling, I gestured toward the hazmat guys. "What's with the moon suits?" Dale looked confused for a second and nodded. "Appearances," he said with a shrug. "Chief evacuated the area on the story of a gas leak." I motioned for my team to move up. "Where is our entrance?" Dale pointed to a spot where two hazmat guys were setting down a large plastic crate with the PCU logo printed on it. I thanked Dale and we headed to the entrance. "Hey, boss," Ryan said, tapping me on the shoulder. "You should see this." He held up his phone. On the screen was one of the photos of Johnson's mutilated body. "What am I looking for?" I asked. He zoomed in on a spot near the upper left thigh. After a long moment, I realized what he meant. Carved into the flesh was a very crude broken circle and arrow symbol. "Send it to HQ," I said, trying to keep my voice low. "Already done." We approached the manhole we would be entering. Logan opened the crate left for us. Inside was our radio tether, a device developed for underground missions. Logan would place small boxes along our path that would send our comms to a larger beacon on the surface. When Logan was packed up, I keyed my radio. "Command, this is Reaper 1. We have reached the target location and are about to make entry." "Reaper 1, copy. Proceed with caution." I turned to my team. "Mask up." Everyone nodded and fitted their gas masks, connecting the hose to the backpack unit. And with that, we descended. I clicked on my mounted light, illuminating the dark tunnel ahead of us. Once everyone was down and Logan placed the first tether box, we started forward. The only sounds were the light splashing of our boots in the shin-high water and the occasional rumble of what I guessed to be the subway. From the faint stench that still punched through our air purifiers, I was glad I had made the decision to take them. I keyed my radio. "How's everyone doing?" "Aside from already wanting to take a shower with a wire brush and bleach, just fine," Alex replied. I grinned. "Good to hear. Just let me know if you see any glowing green ooze. I want to learn kung fu." I heard the muffled chuckles from my team. Even with the joking, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Seeing that symbol carved on Johnson's body couldn't be a coincidence. Everything about the mission seemed off. Just what the hell was going on? After another several minutes of walking, we entered a large room with more tunnels splitting in multiple directions. "Shit," I muttered. Turning to my team, I keyed my mic. "Everyone take a tunnel. Don't go far. Just look for signs." Everyone nodded and split up. "Command, this is Reaper 1. Radio check." Only static responded. I tried the radio again with the same results. One or more of the tether boxes must have been damaged. As much as I didn't like operating without comms, we were too deep to go back. "Got something," Eli said. Everyone else emerged from their tunnels and we converged on him. With a penlight, he pointed out multiple deep claw marks covering the brick wall. I nodded and turned to Logan. "Comms are down. Hang on to the rest of the boxes." I could see the look of concern through his visor, but he nodded and zipped up his pack. Taking point, I motioned for us to continue forward. The further we went, the claw marks became more evident and numerous. "Boss, you seeing this?" Michael asked. I shined my light on the wall. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. The marks weren't random. They were the symbol. The circle with an arrow. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all ranging from the size of a silver dollar to a trash can lid. "Jesus," I heard Eli mutter. At that point, the feeling of unease was so bad I wanted to throw up. "Let's keep moving," I said, motioning us forward. But as I took another step, I stopped, holding up my fist for everyone to freeze. I heard something. Turning my headphone microphones up, I listened, skittering. I took a knee, feeling the cold water soak my leg as I aimed down the tunnel. From behind me, I heard the rustle and light splashes of my team getting ready. I took a deep breath and focused my light down the pitch-black tunnel. But as I listened, it sounded wrong. It didn't sound like the movement of gnomes. There was too much clicking. As I tried to decipher what it could be, the first of the creatures came into view. The glossy black shell of its head was the first thing I saw, followed by the multiple segments of the rest of its body. I immediately identified the creature as an Amazonian deathcrawler. They are a species similar to a centipede, but far larger. And when I say far larger, I mean 3 to 7 feet in length. This one was no exception. Even in the dark, I guessed it was about 4.5 to 5 feet in length and as thick as a fire hose. Without another thought, I aimed and fired. There was a shriek of pain as my 5.56 rounds punched through its exoskeleton. Beyond the beams of our weapon lights and the flashes of my rifle, I could see movement as more death crawlers approached. It looked as though the tunnel itself was moving, with just how many were charging toward us. The sounds of the chattering from our weapons and the hissing of the hot brass landing in the water mixed with the shrieking and thumps of the death crawlers' bodies piling up. After 2 reloads and several close calls, the tunnel returned to its previous silence. We waited for another minute, listening for any more. When nothing approached, I stood and motioned for us to continue. We kept our rifles trained on the piles of dead centipedes as we kicked several of them aside. As we passed, I got a closer look at them. Covering each segment of their exoskeletons were more of the crude symbol. I took out my phone and snapped several photos of the crawlers and the tunnel walls. At that point, I was tired of trying to rationalize it. I just wanted to destroy the targets and let the analysts and cleanup teams figure it out. We continued, watching every shadow that moved and listening for any sound that didn't belong. But for the next 20 or so minutes, it was quiet. The only thing I could hear was rushing water as we approached another junction. Exiting the tunnel, we scanned the much larger room. 3 more tunnels jutted in different directions. Multiple drainage pipes pumped the grey water into a large reservoir at the center of the room. The beams from our lights pierced the darkness as we scanned. I made a mental note to add portable floodlights to our kits for underground operations. "Over there," Ryan said, pointing his light toward one of the tunnels. Sticking halfway out of it was a body, at least what was left of one. We approached cautiously. I knelt down and looked it over. The flesh was shredded, similar to what I saw done to Johnson's body. Judging by what remained of the dirty and stained clothes on this one, they must have been homeless. Shining my light down that tunnel, I could see several more bodies in a similar state. I stood and was about to key my radio, but remembered I couldn't. "Damn it," I muttered, turning to my team. "All right, spread out and look for—" I was interrupted by a grunt from Ryan as he fell to the floor. I aimed my light in his direction. Time seemed to slow as I saw the gnome that had slammed into him charge, its jaw open and claws extended. Before I knew it, I felt the trigger break as I pumped 2 rounds into the pale gray flesh of the lanky creature. Its momentum and the force of my 5.56 rounds caused the body to slam into the guardrail surrounding the reservoir. Ryan raised his saw and ripped a burst of fire into one of the tunnels above us. 3 shredded gnome bodies landed as several more leapt out and charged us. They were quickly knocked back from Logan's 8.6 blackout rounds. "Form up," I yelled, helping Ryan to his feet. I shined my light back down the tunnel with the bodies and saw at least half a dozen more scrambling toward us. I felt Michael pat my shoulder and we both fired. As the 4th one fell into the water, I heard the muffled scream of pain from Eli. I turned and saw him holding his left arm, which was bleeding heavily. Next to him, standing a foot taller than the rest, was a gnome wielding a long and jagged piece of metal. I raised my rifle and put 4 rounds into it. Before it even hit the ground, Ryan was already running to Eli, ripping off his medical bag and pulling out a tourniquet. After what felt like an eternity, the bodies finally stopped. Another minute of silence passed and I let out a deep breath and stood. I looked down at the pile of brass and empty magazines by my feet. Seeing my empty pouches, I realized that I was down to my last rifle mag. Had there been more, we would have been in serious trouble. I turned and stepped to where Ryan was treating Eli. "How's he looking, Doc?" He tied off a bandage and patted Eli on the opposite shoulder. "He's going to need stitches, but he'll be fine." I nodded and slapped Eli on the back. "Hear that? We'll get you a fresh change of socks and you'll be just fine." I saw him roll his eyes behind the gas mask as he elbowed me with his good arm. Just then, we heard something. It sounded like a rumble mixed with a hiss. Everyone raised their rifles and scanned for the new threat. It didn't sound like a gnome, or even the death crawlers. But whatever it was, it sounded pissed. "Ain't no way," Michael said, lowering his rifle. I looked at him and followed his gaze. Floating in the water reservoir was an alligator. Not a cryptid, not a lizard man. Just a normal 5-foot-long alligator. And it was staring at us like we were the ones who didn't belong there and had just woken it from its nap. I couldn't help myself. I started laughing. Then everyone else followed suit, even Eli, who winced a bit. The gator submerged as I turned to my team. "Let's head back. "Hey, John," Logan said. We had just made it back to the manhole we entered. Eli was the first one up. I turned to Logan. "What is it?" He opened his pack full of the tether boxes. I picked up all of them and checked each one. None are damaged. I nodded slowly. Alex tapped my shoulder before scrambling up the ladder. I followed. As soon as I was up top, I keyed my radio. "Command, this is Reaper 1. A second later, "Reaper 1, copy. What happened down there?" I relayed everything, from the death crawlers, gnomes, and even the gator. "Reaper 1, copy. Cleanup teams, analysts, and animal control are en route." I looked around. Eli was sitting on the back of an ambulance getting treated. Agent Janet was coordinating personnel, and Logan was crouched, looking at the main receiver for the radio tether. I walked over. "What did you break?" I asked sarcastically. He looked up at me, then back to the receiver, shaking his head. "Nothing. That's the thing. It looks like it was switched off." I looked between him and the machine. "Are you sure you turned it on?" He looked at me with a stern expression. "I triple-checked it before entry. I know it was on." I stood slowly and glanced around again. I noticed someone was missing. Officer Dale. Trying to look as unperturbed as possible, I walked over to where Janet was ushering some of the hazmat guys to put up barriers. She saw me walking up and closed the gap. "Where's Officer Dale?" I asked. "He received a call over the radio. Left about 20 minutes ago." I nodded, still looking around. "Did you see anyone looking at our equipment?" I asked, gesturing toward the receiver. She shook her head. "No. Why?" I explained what happened with our comms and Logan's discovery. She seemed genuinely confused and concerned. I ruled her out as a suspect. "I didn't see anything, but I'll look into it." I thanked her and walked over to the ambulance. "How long's he got, Doc?" I asked in my best sorrowful tone. Ryan turned to me. "Not long, I'm afraid. A couple of days, maybe a week tops. And he was so young." He raised his arm and wiped away non-existent tears. Eli just rolled his eyes and flipped us off with his good hand. We laughed. "He did need several stitches," Ryan explained, gesturing to the fresh bandages. "He is going to need time off mission to heal. Probably a couple of weeks. On the plus side," he nodded toward the manhole, "doesn't look like he contracted anything from down there. That kind of infection would have been bad." I nodded. "Well, you heard the doc," I said, slapping Eli's good shoulder. "Drink some water and change your socks so you can get back to work." I turned and saw Alex talking to Janet. After some chatting, I saw him pull out his phone and type something. "No way," Michael said from beside me. Logan joined us and stared as well. After another short exchange, Alex came over. He was practically skipping with glee. He looked up at us, all staring at him wide-eyed. "What?" he asked innocently. "What was that about?" Michael asked, gesturing toward where Janet was still trying to run the scene. Alex held up his phone, a huge, shit-eating grin plastered on his face. "Got her number." I looked at the digits under the name Red-Headed Beauty. "How'd you manage that?" Michael asked. Alex pocketed his phone and began flexing. "I just got that good old-fashioned charm. You know what I'm saying?" "You sure she didn't just give you the rejection hotline?" Ryan asked, clearly trying to hold back a laugh. He was given a double middle finger salute from our overly excited demolition expert. "We should keep an eye on her," I heard Eli whisper to Ryan. "If she's into guys like him, we're in trouble." "Good afternoon." Ben was seated in the meeting room. He had bags under his eyes and his clothes were wrinkled. I guessed nobody around here was getting enough sleep. "Hey, Ben," I said, taking my seat. The rest of my team filed in. "Are you all right?" he asked, seeing Eli's sling. He nodded. "Yeah, one of them just got a lucky shot, and here I thought gnomes were friendly and just wanted to travel." Everyone laughed. I knew he was upset about having to sit out for a few weeks. Hell, I didn't like being a man short, especially with how things were going. But we all knew it was for the best. At least, his morale was intact. Once we finished laughing at Alex poking fun at Eli for getting his shit rocked by a travel company's mascot, I gave our debrief. I showed Ben the pictures I took of the symbols carved into the sewer walls and the death crawlers' bodies. "Well, that's concerning," he said, wiping a smear off his glasses. "But we'll hopefully know more when my teams finish clearing the area." "I hope so," I said, putting my phone back. "Was there anything dug up on our victim?" Michael asked. I saw Ben perk up. He may not be comfortable with giving mission briefings, but information gathering was his profession. "Actually, yes," he said, pulling out his phone. "Our contact in Langley did some digging and found a few things." I felt my phone vibrate. Pulling it back out, I opened the file Ben shared. As it turns out, our victim's brother, Senator Johnson, was good buddies with our old friend Congressman Gregory Hoffman. I straightened up at this. Hoffman was the individual responsible for green-lighting the whole cryptid experimentation project. "And what did he have to do with Hoffman?" I asked. "Well," Ben continued, "after some examination of Johnson's finances, we found several donations made to the congressman that were unaccounted for." Scanning the files, I didn't really understand what I was looking at, but if Ben said so, it must be true. "What does that have to do with the victim?" Michael asked. "If it was his brother funding Hoffman, why kill him?" Ben shrugged. "We're not sure. Could be a retaliation thing." I shook my head and put my phone back. This was just getting more and more confusing. After rubbing my eyes, I looked back at Ben. "Was there any progress with finding Mr. Lewis?" Ben shook his head. "No, we are still looking. He left his electronics at his house. We found his personal car abandoned at a gas station several miles north, and of course there was no surveillance indicating how or where he went." I sighed and leaned back in my chair. David was good. He must have left a backup vehicle in a place he knew there weren't cameras. The question I had was, why was he running, especially from us? Was he involved with Project Skinwalker as well? How much more did he know? "Anyway," Ben said, "I suppose you should all get some rest, especially you." He gestured toward Eli. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. I was at a red light on my way home. "Hello? Hey, John, it's Agent Janet." "Hey," I said, "what's up?" I reached over and turned down my radio. "Is everything all right?" I asked. I was concerned that we might have missed one of the gnomes or death crawlers and someone got hurt. About what you asked me about your radio unit." I relaxed slightly as the light turned green. "As you know," she continued, "the street cameras were damaged, so we couldn't see who might have turned off your device. But I had this gut feeling about Officer Dale." She paused for a long moment. "What did you find out?" I finally asked. "Well, he's dead." I pulled into my driveway and just stared ahead. "How? What happened?" I felt my phone buzz with an incoming message. "I just sent you the file. He was found in his apartment with his throat slit, but there is something strange." There was another long pause. "What?" "When the coroner examined his body, he said that Dale had been dead for at least 3 days. I shook my head in disbelief. Did someone kill Dale, steal his uniform, and impersonate him? If so, why didn't anyone in his department report him missing? And why did he show up at our mission location? All these questions were racing through my head. "If that's the case," I said, "who did we talk to?" "I think you should look at the file. We are still looking into this. I'll let you know if we find anything." I thanked her and hung up. Opening the file she sent, I began reading. First was the coroner's report. Like she said, he was killed at least 3 days prior. A deep cut in his throat appeared to have been made by a kitchen knife sitting on his nightstand. No fingerprints aside from his were found. There were no signs of forced entry. The door was locked. A window was cracked open, but he lived in an apartment building on the 3rd floor with no way to get to it. I opened the photos. Dale was lying in bed, dried blood staining the pillows and sheets. His gaunt features were the same as I remembered, albeit more grey. But that didn't make sense. It was exactly the same. If someone killed him and stole his uniform, how did he look the same? Did Dale have an evil twin or something? I zoomed in and almost dropped my phone. Not from the gore or anything like that, but a certain detail caught my attention. It was his distinctly brown eyes. All right, everyone. That's it for this part of the PCU series. Thank you so much for watching and for all the support. It really means a lot. Don't forget to head over to my Spotify and follow if you haven't yet. And if you want early access to videos and extra perks, check out my Patreon and become a member. I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Until then, take care, and I'll catch you soon.